this is how to draw patterns in the cocowyo book, and we are up to the sweater knit pattern. So just remind everyone before you start, put some sheets of paper behind the page that you're working on so that it doesn't ruin the next page when the ink goes through the paper. So for this one I'll be using alcohol markers, felt tip pens and some fine liners as well. So I'll be using number 134 in the Deco Time twin markers. That is raw silk. Which is a very pale beige colour, and then I'll be using 167 pale green light. I'll be using number 143 mint blue. And number 6 vivid pink. But you can use any colours or any brand of alcohol marker that you have. And then I'll be using a slightly darker shade of all these colours in the Staedtler felt tip pens. So they don't have numbers on, slightly darker of the raw silk. That one's a little bit darker than the pink. And that one's a little bit darker for the green. That one's a little bit darker for the blue. And then I've got some Staedtler fine liners for the really tiny details. And again, there's no colour numbers on these either, but there is like a burgundy colour. I'll be using a dark blue colour, a grey colour, because I don't really have a darker beige, and a dark green, and they are the fine liners. I'll also be using a white Posca pen, or you can use a white gel pen, whichever you like using. This is the thin one, 0.7mm, and a black fine liner Arteza Inconic 0.4 pen. I find that that one dries quite quickly without smudging. Also, we'll be needing a pencil. So step 1, we're going to do this sweater knit pattern on these mittens, but you could do them on an actual sweater or pants or a blanket. So it says use a pencil to divide horizontal lines and fill in the base colour. And they've also got a little heart in the middle as well. So I'll start off by drawing the heart. And then they've sectioned it off with, they're not super straight lines, so put a slight wave in them, and that it's easier to go through the middle of the heart and then separate these sections evenly as well. So that's step 1 done. Then it says, oh, it's not all of step 1 done. I've got to fill in the base colour. So top bit is in this raw silk colour. And I don't know why this colour is slightly picking up some of the black out of the outline, no idea why, but that shouldn't actually matter because when we get to this bit the outline is all scruffy for the stitching, so that doesn't matter. And don't worry if the colours bleed past that very thin pencil outline because we're going to be outlining all that in black anyway. And now for the mint blue. And then the vivid pink for the heart in the middle. That is bleeding out a little bit, but it doesn't matter because we can cover it later with the fine liner. So we will wait for that to dry, and you'll know when it's dry because it will feel the same temperature as the rest of the page, because when it's still wet it feels a little bit cooler. And if you have a hand fan or a battery operated fan, you can blow that on there, make that dry a little bit faster. So now that that is dry, we've got step 2 that says use the darker shade to draw folded lines for the first layer. So that's the in-between colour, not the very darkest one. So the felt tip pen. And we're going to draw these like chevron arrow shapes, and they're going opposite directions on each row. So they are all facing that way, then they're facing that way, that way, that way, and that way. And the heart, they're all facing downwards. So make sure each row is facing the opposite way to the next row. And I'm going to draw them on fairly close together. Just leaving a little gap in between, so they're about the same thickness really as the gap that I'm leaving to allow that base colour to show through. And the same for the other mitten. And then we're going to do the same for the green section, but making sure that the arrows, the chevron shapes, are pointing the other way. Might be a little bit tricky where this thumb is, so I might start my chevron shape here. Might just be a little bit easier to work into the thumb from that. And the same for the other mitten. And again, keeping the little arrows quite close to each other, so there's not big gaps in between. And the next row. And then the same for the blue row, but making sure that now they're all pointing that way. And the same for the other mitten here. I'll just start here because it might be a little bit tricky around this thumb. And then let that layer fully dry. I've also got to do the chevrons in the heart, which they've done pointing downwards. So it might be easiest to go straight for the middle and then work upwards and downwards. And then leave that to dry. So now that that is dry, step 3 says use the darkest shade, which is the fine liners that I picked out, to draw folded lines for the second layer. So get the fine liners, start with the top one. I'm using grey because I don't have a very dark beige and I thought that looked better than maybe the brown. So I would go along what I would say is the back of every arrow. Just go along that with the darker shade to give it some shading. And the same for the other one. And then the next colour is the green. So again on the, what I would say, the back of every arrow. So we're going in the opposite direction. And it just adds some dark shading to the back of all this knitted stitched effect. But still allowing that very light base colour to be seen. And the same for the other one. fine liner. We're going to do the same on the back of all these arrows with the darker blue. And the same for the other one. And then you just have to add the darker lines in with the heart, and I would say it looks like they've done the same here inside all of the lines, just with that darker fine liner. We could do with another little layer of the pink in there, just make that a little bit darker. So then the next step is to draw embroidery lines with a black pen and then add highlights with the white pen. So we've got the black fine liner. So to get this effect, I'm going to go along those pencil lines that I drew before, but because this pen is quite thin, I'm going to go along it a little bit more, make it a little bit thicker, and then to give it this like stitched effect, I'm going to go along the line in a little zigzag. Like that, a tiny little zigzag all the way along, and it gives it that little rough effect. And the same for these lines here. And then tiny little zigzag all the way along. And then for the main outline as well, that's already thick, so we're going to do a zigzag all the way around like that, and then they're just done little wisps coming off randomly, different lengths like that, to give it that sort of thread fraying effect. And I'm going to do that round all of the black outlines. And don't forget to go around the heart as well. with the same method, and this covers up any little bits where the ink has bled into the other colours. And then we're going to do exactly the same for the other one. So that's all the black fuzzy effect done, and then we just need the white pen. Give this Posca pen a little shake. And step 4 is draw embroidery lines with a black pen, which we've done, and then add the highlights with the white pen. So they've just put some little highlights on some of the stitching, and there, and a little bit on the points of some of the stitching as well, just to give it a little bit of texture. So these stitches here have a little bit on, some of the tops of the green stitching, they've put a little bit of white in it. I'm just adding little dashes, I'm not doing the whole of the arrow, just some near the points of the blue. Just on really the top bits. And then they've put a little bit of white on the black stitching. Just going to do some little dots because it's very tiny. And not all the way along, just on this side, and then the same on this one, some little dots along this black stitch in and a little bit in the heart as well. So that, I think, is my sweater knit pattern done, and now all I've got to do is colour in the rest of this string.